Yo, what up, y'all? This is your boy R2R Mooly Man, and we back with the Elephant in the Room podcast. It's a good day, y'all. I've been waiting so long. It's back with the Elephant in the Room podcast, meaning basketball season is here for college basketball, and Alabama has now played its first game today. They played against Longwood, and happily, we came out with a 21-point victory, and there's a bunch that I like to talk about. And before I start going more into the details, I just want to go and throw out like the quick obvious things that I'm sure that y'all were able to see. But let's just take a second to appreciate just how good this defense was. At first I was kind of confused at the starting lineup because it was Sears at the one, Burnett at the two, Brandon Miller at the three, Noah Clowney at the four, and Bediako at the five. I mean, we had like three guys 6'9" and over starting, and I'm like, okay, how is this gonna specifically work? This is a very tall lineup. Are we gonna have the speed to be able to like keep up with the other team? And boy, we had the speed, especially on the defensive end. I was so impressed with how Miller, Clowney, and even Nick Pringle were how fast they were and moving their feet. Like, because yeah, even Pringle was able to switch on some smaller guys and keep up with them. And Clowney looked absolutely amazing on the defensive end. And when you have that much length, that much athleticism, this what is it going to result in? Not only is it going to result in a lot of drives being cut off, but also a lot of blocked shots that came today, a lot of rebounds, a lot of putbacks. And I think Bama had like over 60 rebounds today, which was way more than what we had like before like, in the previous season. So it's very obvious that there is a lot of length and athleticism, and the speed at which we played at. The speed and the length was just so entertaining to watch. It really felt like basically an NBA team playing. Obviously, this team also looks a lot rawer than a NBA team because as there is the shot making ability was not quite there. In terms of the 3 pointers, we missed a lot of 3 pointers. I think we finished the game shooting like 10% from three, though I do believe it's gonna get better, or I hope so. I mean, a lot of those shots were also mildly contested or just not hitting like perfect rhythm, because a big complaint about today was that a lot of the 3 point shots that were created, they weren't from paint touches, drive paint touches. Because what Natos likes, he likes it when players are able to drive into the paint and then have a kick out. Whereas a lot of these 3 point shots were made from just passing the ball around the perimeter, or just players driving up to the free throw line and then just kicking it out to the other side, or to just the closest player on the perimeter and having them shoot, or having them just pass it to the corner or whatnot. And my main reasoning for why that happened is I think Nate Oates wanted to keep the playbook simple. He did run some sets, and I do have to go back and watch them, so I'm not going to cover them too much into this video in terms of just like X's and O's or whatnot. But I think he wanted to just make the players make plays for themselves and have them try to take on more ball handling ability and stuff and pass the ball more, making their own decisions. Now, as for the ball handling ability, I'm still unsure about where this team could be with handling the ball. Obviously, when they can have a seam, when there's a seam open, and then they can get a proper angle and get their shoulders down, they can able to make a lot of good drives. And we saw that today. We saw a lot of good drives from a lot of different players. However, being able to just handle the ball properly and navigate through the offense, I'm still not quite sure. Because, for example, like Brandon Miller, he did have quite a few turnovers, just trying to like dribble around, trying to see what openings there were, or just trying to make like a small pass and then results into a turnover. We did have a bunch of turnovers. I believe we had 19 today, but a lot of those were on like just like very sloppy mistakes, where it's like They weren't like full motion passes. They were just like more like you want to tap it to the guy near you, and then they just completely messed up and they would go out of bounds. They looked like very very bad turnovers too, but I think I was just still trying to also get back on pace because on the other hand, I saw a lot of great uh, plays from the transition, and even from like the top of the key or the wing, from passing from the perimeter and just like jetting a jetting a pass right to a big near the rim that was set them for a dunk or a layup. I saw two in transition where there was like a guy standing on the wing, and then and then the guy who was holding the ball on the wing in transition would wait for like a big to run down the court. And twice that happened in like the early first half was with Clowney and Bediako. They were just running full speed, and then whoever was passing it to them just just jetted a very quick pass right into their hands, and then they used their long legs to go for a dunks. And yeah, like defensively, this team was amazing as a unit. They were switching very seamlessly, and Longwood was very bothered by it. They try to run a lot of heavy sets and a lot of motion. They try to mix up the motions and stuff to where they would set a lot of off ball screens, have players running to and from like different sides of the perimeter, like from different baseline to wing or wing to baseline, whatnot. I saw one action where it's like where like one guy on the opposite wing, he passed it to like the guy at the top of the key, or no, it was like there was a guy at the top of the key running towards the basket, and then there was a big setting an off ball screen for him, and then he would turn and run to the left side of the court, but there were already two players on the left side of the court, and those guys would run to the right side of the court, and what they were trying to do is just trying to get some like confusion going, but Alabama stayed very very disciplined, and they even tried doing some weave offense, started weaving the ball a lot, uh, just a bunch of off ball screens, whether it was like in the high post, players moving longitudinally or latitudinally from baseline, whatnot. And yeah, Bama was able to be very disciplined. They were communicating very well, and they just seemed to like recognize when to switch and when not. Like it was just like very natural, to where it's like as if they just studied it so much to where they know, okay, this guy's here. Very good defensive awareness I saw from this team, too, and in the paint there was a huge mismatch because I think by the end of the first half, it was like Bama had 26 points in the paint, whereas Longwood only had 8. They could not score. They could not get any shots over Bediako and Pringle, and and that was the main key of this game, was that Longwood was too small. They clearly had the speed to keep up with us, but they were just too small for Alabama, which is why I still think this defense is much better than it was last year, but still not sold on it being like elite yet. Maybe when they play like better competition, you're gonna be playing against bigger guys and having to deal with that physicality because like for example, Michael Christmas from Longwood, he burned some Bama players a lot by just going into the post. Whether it was, he had a couple plays in the post, and he had like in the mid post range and also in the paints, where he just caught the ball and just started doing a lot of spin moves, post action moves and whatnot, and also being able to back down and just finish tough shots. He finished like two or three over Clowney, and then he did one over Brandon Miller. But at the same time, watching him move, you could tell it was very much based on the footwork and not as much just him being physically dominant. So I won't really overreact to that, but he also is significantly shorter than Clowney and Brandon Miller. But I digress. But in terms of how they looked looked offensively. Yeah, they were missing a lot of shots, but they're still able to get to the rim. A lot of great one-on-one basketball I saw today, to where a lot of where they would get drives or just make a lot of and ones. There was a time when because in the first half there was like no calls being called. They would be very disciplined, and then in the second half when there was a time, I want to say like with around 10 minutes remaining in the second half, calls are starting to pick up against Bama, and then from like minutes like 9 through 6 or whatever, they had like four and ones, and part of that is because Jaden Bradley is very physical on drives. He's able to make very tough contested layups, and just he also had one like circus shot that went in that was an and one, and also Rylan Griffin. He was probably the offensive guy of the night, because not only was he able to, he looked good in all facets of the offense, because he had some great plays feeding, like finding the right players and feeding them on when they get open near the basket or whatnot. I think he had a good jump shot there, and he had a couple nice drives, but also he also knows when to cut. He's a very smart offensive player, and you can see once he recognizes like the seam in the defense, then he makes a quick cut, and and then and then not only that, he also knows how to square up his shoulders, and also he has an ability to where even though he's not like a super bulky guy, he still knows how to use his frame to draw fouls. Where you'll see him like squaring up his shoulders, or he'll just turn completely sideways and just like dribble the ball right through the center of his body, and just go up with it and draw a foul, because drew quite a few fouls. But yeah, he was fantastic, and he was also playing he and Bradley, as soon as they got in the game, were playing suffocating defense, to where they were literally putting their forearms into the defender's hip almost. Like actually they were in some of it, but they were just playing very tight defense, and were not letting them dribble at all, the defenders. As the game wore on, they did allow a few drives, but they were able to cut them off from going completely to the rim. And yeah, these guys also played phenomenal defense. A lot of guys just either just cutting players off from even getting to the rim, or just making them having to force really bad layups on drives, or they won't even get the right angle, so then they have to kick it out or whatnot. And even if they did get beat, like on a pick and roll or whatnot, uh, Bediako was such a difference maker in altering shots. Even if they would get rebounds, they missed so many shots at the basket, because Bediako was just so much bigger, to the point where as the game progressed, you could tell like he wasn't even trying. Like he was able to just predict their moves so quickly. So yeah, defensively, we were on top. Offensively, there were still some issues. Like for example, Mark Sears, he's forced way too many drives, and that resulted into bad crazy shots or turnovers. Uh, Brandon Miller, he actually had a good game. He actually had a good game. He did have a couple of really bad turnovers, but overall he did have a really nice layup that I can remember off the top of the head, where like he has such a great first step. Like once he gets right in front of you just a little bit, he can just use his size and length to just go right to the basket, and you won't be able to contest it. Uh, who else was there? I should be probably picking players out. I'll pick on Darius Miles, since he didn't have the best game. Now a lot of people are saying he's trash. He did get a block, eh, where it was like it looked like he was struggling really hard to stay on his feet and not fall down, but he did keep composure, and he just put his hands up and got the block. It didn't seem like he was like he timed it perfectly. It was just he just happened to be right there, and he did have a really good pass to one of the bigs that set up for like an easy layup, like one of those quick passes from the wings I was telling you about earlier. Uh, but other than that, He tried to force some shots to result in turnovers. Had a really bad foul in transition. He just did not look good at all. And even Noah Gurley, he the only thing I remember seeing of him, he tried to drive once, but then he immediately got stripped, and it was confirmed that he was on a bike. So there's that. And NATO said that both of these players are still dealing with injuries, so we'll have to see what we think about that. Bediako was very aggressive, but who else is there? Rylan Griffin, we talked about. Mark Sears, Namari. Namari had a tough shooting night. We Speaking about missing threes, Namari definitely had the worst misses, where it's like they barely hit the side of the rim or they just dinked them. I think that's going to change. Maybe he did look like he was out of the element, but at least from what I think he played, I think the defense was solid there. He didn't shine as much as the other five guys I mentioned, other 5, 6 guys I mentioned, but at least he was still there and able to get some good minutes. He got 15 minutes, so maybe not the most, but I think this shot's going to be there. He has a very PJ Tucker-ish shooting form when he's shooting from the corner too, which is a very good sign. But we did miss like I think like 4 wide open uh, corner threes. So there is that, and we also allowed only 54 points by Longwood. But if you watched it, we made Longwood work for all of those 54 points. I did not see them miss. I think they missed like one open shot, but they were making every single open shots, and then they were also hitting some contested shots, where it was like after like once they hit like 4 minutes in the game and they got a one big three. And well, they got 2 threes in like 2 possessions in like a minute or something, starting like 4 minutes left in the first half. And then you could just see that they just kind of just said like, screw it, we're just going to play as aggressively and as hard as that we can. And they fought for those 54 points. So that should really tell you something about this defense. And lastly, let me just go about the rebounding is we finished with 67 rebounds. We got so many offensive rebounds. And the thing is, like, I think 4 players had like over 10 rebounds. One of them being Mark Sears. Mark Sears has a great vertical, and it's not just rebounding, but it's the verticality of the team. I saw both Pringle and Mark Sears just jumps extremely high, and they were able to grab the rebound at the very top of their jumps, like the kind of jumps that you see that announcers will go, wow, or whatnot, because I heard them raving about how high Pringle got off the ground, which he can get pretty high off the ground, and that's one thing. This team has so much length and athleticism that they should be able to just like not get bodied by teams at all, and obviously, like, even though these players are long, quick, and athletic, you can also argue that if they play like very physical players, they won't be able to match up. But also, how many big physical players do we have to really be concerned about, especially in this day and age? Maybe Oscar Shibwe, but like everyone knows Oscar Shibwe is going to get 15 and 15 every game. And it's not going to really do anything for Kentucky, whether Kentucky wins or not, deals with how the rest of the team plays. But I digress. There's plenty I want to talk about, but I'm just gonna finish it up by saying there was one thing in the Twitter space that Joe Corona, who is really really smart at just analyzing basketball, and not only that, and just explaining it in words too. He mentioned about like the transition offense. Now transition defense was so good to where it was like where I literally saw a play where Griffin got stripped, and then the Longwood defender had like a wide open lane, but because like the players on our team are so freaking fast, that you could see the Longwood defender hesitate, and he just settled for like a bad mid range shot off the dribble, and it was like what, it's like what you could just tell like he was like hesitant of just trying to take it to the rim. That should show you how fast we were on defense, and even on offense, the couple of plays I would mention about those dunks we had, but overall those dunks I was mentioning about in transition were were not necessarily outlet passes, but getting the pass to somebody open on the wing of on the other side of the court. Because when we come down with the rebound, you can tell we're not filling up the lanes, and we're not really hitting, and we're not even passing the ball up, moving the ball up the court, which is kind of sad because I think part of it is because, for one, the passing is still not there, but two, also like a lot of the forwards need to probably aren't the best ball handlers in transition going full speed. So maybe that's why they're not just pushing up the pace so much, because they have the speed to score in like a millisecond. But yeah, I don't know how they would fix it. I mean, Joe Corona said they should just stick to bounce passes. That would just, because when you bounce it off the ground, that's going to allow the receiver of the pass to adjust when, whereas if you just throw it up in the air, it's going to be harder to adjust. But still, I do think ball handling has to do with it, because in case that they can't just pass it and have to dribble, it's kind of awkward right there. So there is that, and yeah, overall, offense definitely needs some work on. I'm hoping to see more sets run. Defense, everything is there. Maybe Mark Sears could play better defense. He did get blown by a lot, but he has the speed, uh, like, he has the speed on defense to keep up with opposing defenders, but it seems like his reaction times on dribblers is kind of like delayed. Like he doesn't have the best reaction times when the person he's defending starts driving, but he can hound the ball, and he can hound the defender, and he had a couple plays where he did that, but there were a lot of plays when the big had to switch over because Sears couldn't quite stay in front of his man. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, obviously he's maybe at the most 6 foot, not the biggest frame, so. But I still think his speed can make up for it, and at least not be a complete liability on the defensive end. And outside of him, everyone else has looked fantastic. So yeah, I hope this was good. I know I kind of just rambled and went on like different tangents and stuff, but I did want to keep it from not dragging out too long, and I will post some football content too, because I got some thoughts on the football season, but in this past football weekend. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on these analyses, and appreciate y'all listening to the Elephant in the Room podcast. This was Alabama versus Longwood. Looking forward to the next game versus Liberty. Take it easy, y'all. Peace. Make sure y'all subscribe.